Hello, and welcome back to the Librarian of the Rings. My name is Ben, I'm the librarian, and today we're going to be talking about more proxies that I have come up with for the new Hobbit the Magic the Gathering set. Now, these are not official, they're not from Wizards of the Coast. This is just me exploring some of the ideas that I think will be really important in the Hobbit Magic the Gathering set. Now, this does not come out until August of 2026. Right now, it's January of 2026, and we are just about to get the Lorwyn set for Magic the Gathering. So I'm a little ahead of the curve here, but I really want to just take the time to think through the way they're going to translate the Hobbit into Magic the Gathering. So last time I focused in on Bilbo and kind of the treasure aspect of things. Right now I want to focus in on the Mirkwood Elves. Now we don't really get Mirkwood Elves in The Lord of the Rings outside of Legolas. So we really want to think about how these elves from The Hobbit, which are significantly different than the elves in The Lord of the Rings, are going to be translated into the world of Magic the Gathering. So in The Lord of the Rings, the elves were primarily green-blue. That was kind of their archetype, and I don't expect that to change. The elves in The Hobbit are associated with Mirkwood, with the forest, and with the river. And so we would expect them to kind of maintain that green-blue status. That's also going to help them play with other elf typal decks in Magic the Gathering more broadly. So thinking about this, I want to think about some specific cards. And the first one that I want to talk about is Galleon, Elvish Butler. So Galleon is the butler who is going to get the chief of the guards drunk and then allow basically Bilbo to escape there. But he is an elf who is important in kind of the king's household. So on this card, he is a green card, and I put him in as costing 2 and 1. And he's only a 1/1 because it's not like he's a big fighter. It's not like he's strong, but he is important. And so it's really that cost comes into play with his abilities. He's a legendary creature, so just one of him, and he's an elf. And that's basically all we've got. You could maybe put him in as elf advisor or something like that if that subtype was going to be important. I don't think it probably will be in this case. But the abilities that I've put on him here are whenever an elf you control enters the battlefield, create a food token. Food and drink is kind of his whole thing. So if an elf enters, you get to create a food token. So food generator, that's really important. Then you have sacrifice a food, put 3+1/+1 counters and a stun counter on target creature. So his main role is in offering some wine to the chief of the guards, and then they both get drunk and fall asleep. So how do we portray this in Magic? Well, you want him to be fortifying another creature, so +1/+1 counters, and he can do quite a lot, right? Like, he is a 1/1, but he can put 3+1/+1 counters onto another creature. But in order to do that, you have a penalty. He has to put a stun counter on it. So that's how I kind of like molded that part of the story into this card. The next elf card that I want to talk about is his friend, the Chief of the Guards. So the Chief of the Guards doesn't have a name. In the Hobbit movie, they kind of put this role into Tauriel, but in the book, no name. He's just a guy who is supposed to be in charge of guarding things, and he gets drunk. So he is going to be, of course, stronger because being a guard is his role, and he's going to cost 3 and a green and be a 3/3. And then he's got some important abilities. One is you can tap him to create a 1/1 green elf soldier token. So as the Chief of the Guards, he should be able to bring in other soldiers. Obviously, this kind of a deck would be token heavy because you'd be creating food and you'd be creating soldiers. He also has tap him to untap target elf. So he can work with Galleon and the stun counters in order to try and remove those stun counters. You can use this tap ability in order to untap other elves. So I think that would play really well into his role in the story here. Next, for kind of a generic elf, not a legendary one, we're going to have the Raft Elf. The Raft Elves are the ones who collect the barrels, rope them together into rafts, and then go down the river. And they essentially are transporting Bilbo and the dwarves down the river, and they don't know it. So for them, a very basic kind of card here, cost 1 and a blue in order to get a 1/2 Raft Elf, and then you get to search for an island. So whenever in Magic you have somebody who's kind of traversing something, in order to show that, you can use land fetch for that. So that's what we're doing here. We're using them as a land fetch to bring out another island in order to kind of ramp there, but also to show how they are traveling on the river. And lastly, we have the Elven King. Now, the Elven King does not have a name in The Hobbit. Of course, we learn later in The Lord of the Rings that his name is Thranduil, but in The Hobbit, he doesn't have a name, so I've just called him Elven King. He would be probably a commander, and hopefully a commander in a Battle of Five Armies commander set, right? So you would have an elf deck in the Battle of Five Armies, and he would be one of the commanders for that. He would cost 2 plus green plus blue plus white. He is a 4/5, so he's pretty strong, obviously. He'd be really an important player in terms of being a strength, but not overwhelming strength. And then he has important abilities because his whole role here is leadership. So I want to kind of capture the essence of his story in this card. So first we have, when this creature enters, exile up to one target legendary creature. So he has removal with him, and that's important because of course he is able to capture Thorin and hold him in prison, and then they're able to capture all of the dwarves. So this exiling a legendary creature, that is, I think, an important component of his story arc. Now, there's another thing that happens several times in The Hobbit, and you don't really get this in either the Rankin Bass film or the Peter Jackson films, but when the dwarves kind of rush in on the elves who are feasting in the forest, they disappear. They just disappear completely, and everything goes dark. So in order to kind of capture that, I want him to be able to have elves phase out. Phasing out in Magic allows you to treat cards like they don't exist for a period of time. His second ability is sacrifice X foods. That has to do with the feasting that they're doing, and X elves phase out until end of turn. Let's say you had a whole bunch of foods. You could use Galleon the Butler to generate that. Let's say you had 5 foods. You could sacrifice those foods in order to phase out 5 elves. So say they're going to get a bunch of damage, you sack the foods, you save them. And that really kind of brings in this idea of the elves just disappearing in the woods. Another really important part of the Elven King's character is that he's not just a selfish jerk. Like most characters in The Hobbit, he can be a selfish jerk at times, but primarily he's also a good guy. In fact, there's a line in The Hobbit that says, elves are good people. So he really comes to the aid of the men of Lake Town after their town is destroyed. And so we needed to capture that in the card as well. He is able to provide resources to them. And in this game, I'm anticipating treasure being really important. I talked about that before. And so I think resources can be shown as treasure here. So his last ability would be sacrifice X treasures, X humans gain indestructible until end of turn. Basically showing that he can save the humans. And he does. That's a really important part of it. He uses his own resources to save the humans. Of course, he wants to get a lot of resources from the mountain, but he is willing to turn aside on a humanitarian mission on his way. Okay, so I anticipate there being a lot more than just these 4 elves in the set, and we may talk about more of them as we go along, but now I want to hear from you. What do you think of these elf cards that I've come up with? Do you think they would play well? Where do you think they would be unbalanced? I think that the Elven King might be a little too powerful with all of his abilities, but I really wanted to capture the essence of that story there. So we'll chat down in the comments, and until next time, farewell wherever you fare. May your ears receive you at your journey's end.